Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, "My grandma complied with her husband's request for over 50 years, much to his chagrin." So, this is my grandmother's story. My family has been telling the tale for decades. Grandpa himself told it to his daughter's fiancé as a lesson in not underestimating his new bride. Grandma told it slightly differently to my mom when she and my father were engaged. This is somewhere between the two versions. It's a lesson in, be careful what you wish for, as you just might get it. Personally, I've always thought that it was hilarious. My grandparents were very old school. Grandpa got a job working for John Deere as a teen and worked his way up the ladder to foreman, then manager. Grandma was a typical housewife in the 1950s and was held to typical housewife standards. She was to cook and clean and be prepared to entertain Grandpa's business associates at a moment's notice. It was her job to make sure the children were taken care of and never got in her husband's way. She was expected to have dinner on the table at 5:30 sharp, when he got home from work. Her house and herself were to be impeccably kept at all times, etc. They were progressive and well off enough that Grandma had her own car. She was expected to use it to run the household errands and take the 4 kids to appointments and such. It was important that her husband not be bothered with such things. The household and family were her responsibility. He had a job. Well, one day, Grandpa arrived home from work and not only was dinner not on the table, but Grandma wasn't even there. The kids, teens at the time, hadn't been fed. Their homework was still on the kitchen table, there were unwashed dishes in the sink, and a dozen other little chores hadn't been done yet. Most importantly, Grandpa was inconvenienced. He'd been home just long enough to let his frustration stew into anger when Grandma's car pulled into the drive. He began shouting at her before she'd even had the chance to set down her purse or take off her jacket. He ranted about all the things she hadn't done because she was out, running around, when she should have been home, taking care of the house and making his dinner. He worked very hard all day to provide for this family. Was it too much to ask for a hot dinner when he got home? She'd had a very good reason for not being home, but he never let her tell it, accepting no excuses. But she was a good wife, so she intended to let him vent for a while, then she would serve him supper and explain what had gone wrong. Then, Grandpa screwed up. As sometimes happens when we speak in anger, he began to blame the wrong thing for his irritation. He began to blame the car and her access to it. He said something to the effect of, "You don't have any business out driving around anyway. You should be home. I should never have let you start driving in the first place. Women shouldn't drive." "You don't want me to drive?" Grandma asked calmly, retrieving her keys from her purse. "Fine. Then I won't drive ever again." And she set those car keys on the counter, put her things away, and served dinner. And bless her heart, Grandma stuck with that declaration no matter how much more difficult it made life. Grandpa had to take afternoons off in the middle of the week when a teacher scheduled a meeting. He didn't get a moment's peace on the weekends, between grocery trips and taking the kids to activities or doctor's appointments or for haircuts or clothes. He had to drive Grandma to every Saturday salon appointment. Previously, Grandma had taken herself and the kids to church, letting him sleep. Now he had to wake up early on Sundays to take them all himself. Grandpa was nearly as stubborn as his wife. He held out, expecting her to apologize and ask for her keys back. She never did. Instead, she simply rearranged the household schedule so that he could handle all the driving. Months later, after never getting a single weekend to relax, after having dinner pushed back nearly every day because he had to drive someone someplace, he finally gave in and apologized. He tried to tell her that he was wrong and that she should start driving again. He tried to tell her that he now appreciated all she did to make his life easier. He all but begged her to take those keys. I suspect that Grandma had always disliked driving, because she never did take back those keys. Nothing Grandpa said or did could convince her to get back behind the wheel. He'd said she had no business driving a car and she was going to hold him to that declaration, no matter what. For over 50 years, until the day she died, Grandma never drove a car again for any reason. Not after the kids graduated and moved out. Not after Grandpa retired. Even after Grandpa's death in the 80s she still refused because, my husband always said that women shouldn't drive. Next one is titled, "We won't come fix your kitchen sink unless it's overflowing. We'll get to it next week, is that so? Okay, I could fix this in 10 minutes. But I'm not allowed to per my lease. Last time it was full of cooked elbow noodles. I have a garbage disposal. Ain't no way 3 cups of pasta are getting through that garbage disposal without being destroyed. They were perfectly fine so it wasn't from me. I don't even eat pasta. Anyway, my kitchen sink backed up yesterday. Running the disposal didn't help. Plunging didn't either, so I was forced to call maintenance. They say they are in another state and they will get to it by 5 p.m. 5 p.m. comes around. No show. I seen the guy outside so I went and talked to him. He said if it isn't overflowing then it will have to wait till next week. Wait, so you're telling me I might have to wait a week to wash dishes? Alright. Went back upstairs. Turned the water on until the water looked like it was going to overflow. Poured a cup of water on the floor in front of the sink. Used a spray bottle to mist the cabinet. Called. They were here in 5 minutes. I know it's not really that good, but I got the job done. I pay $800 a month rent. I shouldn't have to wait up to a week for something I am qualified enough to do. Next one is titled, "Come see me in the morning." This happened quite some time ago, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. I work in a technical field with on-site visits to customer site being the norm at the time. One customer had been waiting quite some time for service due to asbestos abatement in the building blocking access to the basement where I needed to work. The customer was government and the end user was an executive, so they insisted we do the work anyway. I was simply told to go to site and do the work with no preamble. I reasonably believed that the asbestos abatement was completed and all was good to go. Well, when I got to site they told me that the area was still contaminated and I would need to comply with their protection protocols. Once I learned that these protocols included striping off all of my clothes, showering, putting on an environmental containment suit complete with isolated air supply, I more than balked. I said, hell no. I wasn't performing emergency work. I was adding a telephone line to a phone system for an executive that could wait as far as I was concerned. Next step was to inform my manager of the situation. To say my manager and I did not get along would be a severe understatement. Openly hostile on both sides would be closer to the truth. He simply couldn't fire me, or he would have, I have no doubt. I was simply too good at my job. I, on the other hand, did not have a lot of opportunities to move elsewhere as the knowledge and job was very specific. Anyway, this went as expected for me. Hey, I can't do this job as they are still removing asbestos. Manager. We know about the asbestos but we made arrangements for access. You didn't tell me anything, I walked into this blind. There's no way this is important enough for all the hoops I need to jump through. Manager. Do the job or get your ass in my office in the morning. I'm not doing it, so see you in the morning. I knew how the morning meeting would go. He'd have a letter for me to sign about refusing to work as a best case. Possibly worse, he might actually follow through on past threats and let me go. As luck, convenience would have it, this particular building was home to the Department of Labor for my region. I strolled down to the 5th floor to talk to Occupational Health and Safety. I explained the situation to them and they were very helpful. Not only did I have the right to refuse work under those conditions, I was obligated to refuse. Had I actually done the work and something went wrong, my company would have faced stiff fines and sanctions. They were very familiar with this specific scenario as they themselves were in the same building. They provided me with all of the relevant statutes in documented form, highlighted relevant sections and drafted a letter to my manager by name advising him of his obligation to support my decision. I slept well that night. The next morning was interesting to say the least. There was a lot of back and forth, but I did not reveal my ace in the hole as I wanted him to hang himself. He wanted me to sign several pieces of paper stating that I refused to do the work, that I put the company in a bad position and that my employment with the company was subject to termination. I maliciously complied, took copies, and stored them away safely elsewhere. I then returned to his office and gave him the documents that were prepared the day before with the biggest shit-eating grin I can ever remember having. He did not take it well, claimed I set him up, threatened me, the whole gamut. I told him I needed a written apology or I would take everything to corporate. He never came through on the apology and I never went to corporate, but he also never gave me grief after that. I basically castrated his authority over me, and although it would be a stretch to say I enjoyed my remaining time at the company, that would not be accurate, but at least it was less bad. Next one is titled, "Is this the hottest wing you have?" I used to own a wing joint. Nothing fancy, but a good selection of wing flavors and beer. Inevitably we would have people come in and order the suicide wings. I like super spicy foods, so these were pretty damn hot. Of those people, about 5 to 10% would always start the joke, sarcastic conversation. "These aren't that hot. Can't you do better? Yuck, yuck, yuck." One of my best regulars, a dentist who fancied himself a gardener, decided to help us out and planted a ghost pepper bush, at the time the hottest pepper in the world, and he could bring us the bounty of his harvest. And he would intentionally underwater the bush so the peppers would be as hot as they could be. When he would bring us the peppers, I would grind them, seeds and all, into a nice paste which I would combine with our suicide sauce and keep to the side for when our spicy wing connoisseurs would show up and complain about the suicide sauce not being hot enough. I would only serve them one death head wing, seemed a fitting name. I would make them wear gloves to eat it to prevent capsaicin burns on their skin. I would specifically tell them about the heat they were about to get into, trying to dissuade them from eating this culinary monstrosity. By the time we got through all this, every single person always now viewed this as an insult to their manhood, never had a woman complain about heat, but would sometimes actually ask if there was another level they could try, and could not be stopped from eating this wing. So they did. The fun thing about capsaicin oil is it can often take a few seconds to kick. Usually just enough time for the person to scarf down the wing and start to smugly tell us how it wasn't that hot. And then the heat would begin. And once it started it was relentless. The wing was free, but the cup of milk after was $20. I never had a single person ask for a second one. Next one is titled, "Driver wants me to cancel the ride I requested." And I did, after he arrived at the pickup location to see I'm already gone. This is probably the prettiest thing I've done, at least that I can remember. My friends and I came out of a KTV at like 2:30 in the morning and it was time for us to go home. I order an Uber, or Didi as it's called in Shanghai, and we get picked up for a ride surprisingly quick for that time of night. The driver is about 10 minutes away, but that's fine. However, I'm watching the dot on the screen and noticing that the car hasn't moved at all. After 20 minutes of waiting, I finally message the driver what's up. He asks me to cancel the ride because he doesn't want to make the trip. It's close to his ending time and if I cancel the trip, he still gets paid. Drivers also aren't really allowed to cancel trips anyway without good reason. I refuse. I tell him that he's the one who accepted the ride. He needs to pick us up and complete it. We go back and forth on this for a good 10 minutes and I adamantly tell him I'm not canceling. Meanwhile, my friend has been trying to order another Didi and there's no one in our vicinity to pick us up. The wait time for getting picked up is like 20 plus minutes, but we knew it could easily be longer. It's after 3 o'clock and we've now been waiting 30 minutes for this dude to pick us up. My friend hasn't gotten another ride either and there's literally no cabs in sight and hasn't been for the whole time we've been outside waiting. Finally, at about 3:15 miracle of miracles, a cab comes by and picks us up, and we head to our destination. Meanwhile, I'm watching the Didi driver who I still have on the hook and I finally see him start to drive towards us on the map, after 45 minutes of just sitting there and arguing with me about canceling my ride. We make it to our own destination about 15 minutes later just as he is pulling up to our original pickup location. It's only when I get the notification that he has arrived to pick me up that I comply with his request and cancel the ride. I send him a message that we've found alternative transportation and thanks anyway. He still got paid, since I was the one who canceled, but hopefully he learned to think twice about accepting rides he doesn't want to drive. Last one is titled, I'm off then. I used to work for a well-known camera company, the one that went under then got bought out by a douche from Dragon's Den. As a 0-hour sales assistant, keyholder as I was in college at the time studying a BA Hans. You can imagine the amount of study time, work that goes into it. My manager was a dick, who aside from being a dick was also stealing goods from the company and getting his girlfriend to transfer them to her store, but were showing as having arrived even though they were being transferred home. But that's another story entirely. I was in the store with just Dick, and it was heaving with customers. Dick would usually be in the office whilst I ran about serving, demonstrating, restocking, etc. On this day Dick had sorted the rota and slapped it down in front of me whilst I was with a customer. The customer stepped away for a moment, so I read the rota and found that Dick had given me several shifts on days that I had told him I had exams. I told Dick this, and just as the customer returned, Dick began berating me, in front of the whole store, that I was useless, not part of the team blah blah blah. I reiterated that I can't work those and he told me that I might as well duck off if you can't commit to working. Okay then, off I ducked, right there and then leaving him with a store full of shocked customers. He screamed at me for the keys as I exited, so I accidentally on purpose tossed them at him but they landed in the drain. Thanks for listening.